guys, welcome back to my channel. I'm so glad you stopped by today because today we are going to do another mystery art doll challenge. So I've done dinosaurs, I've done fusion creatures, I've done a bunch of different types of mystery drawings for art dolls, but I've never done a monster before. And I've recently seen a few other YouTubers do this for drawings and sculptures, so I figured it'd be fun to do an art doll version of it. So I have a bunch of different characteristics for our monster in this cup, from like having multiple teeth to extra eyeballs to wings and just whatever. And I'm going to draw, I think, like 3 or 4 of them, and we're going to create a monster using these characteristics. So I'm going to shake it up, and we are going to pick our characteristics. So let's see. I've got one right here. Okay, this is our first one. Okay, so our monster is going to have a chubby body. Okay, so he's going to be nice and chubby. Next, he is going to have extra arms. Will you see that? Yeah. Okay, so we got a chubby, extra armed monster right now. Let's do one more. And he is going to have scales. Okay, so chubby, extra arm monster with scales. Sounds like fun. Okay, so while designing this monster, I decided that I wanted to add only one eye to it. I know that wasn't part of the rules, but as long as I stay in the things that we already selected, I feel it's okay to add things to it just a little bit. Plus, a lot of the characteristics that we drew for this specific monster are a little vague, so I figured I'd just have a little bit more fun with it. So the eye that I'm using for this is not glass or resin. Well, it's part resin. I actually sculpted this out of clay, I painted it and then resined over it. I was trying to see if there was a way that I could make eyes a different way, and I kind of liked how they came out. I mean, they'll work for this piece, but they need a little bit more work before I actually start using them more often. But yeah, what I'm going to do is I'm going to start with the eye first, and I'm going to start taking some strips of clay and making some eyelids. This piece is going to be separate from the mouth. We really aren't making a face, we're more making clay pieces to attach to the body. So I'm going to start with the bottom eyelid, move on to the top eyelid, and then if I want any extra wrinkles, I just have to add extra strips of clay around this. Also, to help frame the eye just a little bit better, I took some smaller strips of clay and I went around the eye again. I blended everything together, kind of cleaned up my lines, I added a texture to it, and then I also poked little holes above the eyelid on the top of the eye. So I'm just making some tiny little holes, and what we're going to do later is we're going to add some eyelashes. But right now I'm going to get all the clay pieces done first. Next, we're going to be making a mouth for our monster. Now, I want my mouth for this creature to be very large, almost taking over the entire body, because the design of this creature is not going to have a body and a head, it's kind of just one thing. So I'm going to be making a very large mouth. I'm going to start with a large lump of clay, and I'm going to roll it out to have a flat surface to start with. Once I have that laid out, I'm going to take a long strip of clay. This one's fairly thick, and I'm going to kind of mush it right in the middle of my clay surface. And this is actually going to be the teeth of our monster. So I'm going to place that, I'm going to kind of push it in so it's not super raised up, it's a little bit blended in, and then we're going to take our tools and mark out where our teeth are going to go. So I just want to have some jagged teeth, so I'm just going back and forth making triangles. After we have the shape of the teeth laid out, we can then start adding the lips around them. So I'm going to start with the upper lip first, and then we'll move on to the bottom. So I'm going to roll out another strip of clay the size that I want the upper lip to be, so I'm going to make sure that it's the thickness that I want. I'm going to lay it at the very top of where the teeth are and kind of clean up my edges and blend it in a bit. And I'm also going to take my fingers and tools and kind of push in right at the very top to make a cupid's bow. Once I have the layout of the upper lip finished, we can then move on to doing the same thing with the bottom lip. The only thing different is I'm going to make the bottom lip a lot thicker. So I'm going to get that placed, adjust how the expression of the mouth looks until I like it, and then I can start adding details to it. Now if you want, you could just add texture to it and it'd be fine, but I'm going to add texture and I'm also going to give the mouth snake bites. So I'm going to add some piercings on the bottom lip. I just figured this would be a lot of fun to do. So for the texture of the lips, I'm just making some lines going across them. I'm keeping it really organic and just random. Some of them are going to be a little bit more indented than others, and some are going to be extremely light. So I'm just going to go over the top lip and the bottom lip, and then I'm going to take some more strips of clay. These are kind of smaller, and I'm going to cut them to the same length and place them on the bottom lip. So I'm just kind of wrapping them around the bottom lip and then cleaning up the edges. Now I'm trying to save some energy and not have my oven going all day, so I kind of waited on the eye to bake until the mouth was done. So both of these are going to be baked at the same time and same temp. I know the eye is smaller, but it'd be perfectly fine going in with the mouth. So I'm going to put these clay pieces in the oven at 275 Fahrenheit for probably about 45 minutes. While those are baking, I'm going to start on the feet and the hands. So I'm going to be working on a piece of tinfoil, that way it doesn't get stuck to the counter, and I'm just going to start laying out some little balls and stuff to make the shape of the bottom of the foot. So I'm going to start with the sole of the foot, just kind of figure out how large I want it, and then I'm going to take balls of clay and add those for the toes. I think we're just going to do 3 toes and 3 fingers for the hands. So I'm going to position that. I decided that I wanted to add a bit more heel to the foot, and I'm just going to blend everything together, clean it up, and add a bit of a texture to it. Once I'm done with the bottoms of the feet, I'm going to throw them in the oven with the other clay pieces, but these are only going to stay in there for about 20 minutes. If your other clay pieces need more time, or if they're done, just kind of switch everything around. And then once the bottoms of the feet are done baking, we can start working on the tops and the toes a bit more. So I'm going to start with a large ball of clay, and this is going to be kind of where we connect it to the body. So I'm going to push that right on the very top of the foot and kind of blend it in. Now the way I have the foot, I'm not going to do much detail to the sides of the feet because most of that's just where the fabric's going to connect, but we are going to add a lot of detail to the toes. So I know I want to add some claws, so I'm going to take some balls of clay and I'm going to push them at the very ends of the toes and then just kind of pinch them until they're a little bit pointed. I'm going to do that to all of the toes, and then I'm going to take some smaller balls of clay and I'm going to layer these on top of the toes. These are going to be kind of like little scales. I'll make sure to clean up the edges, that way it's easy to connect to the fabric later, and then these can go in the oven for another 30 minutes. And then for the hands, we're going to be doing 4 of them, and they're basically going to be all the same. So I'm laying out a strip of clay, and then I'm going to take some balls of clay and make those into the fingers. We're going to blend those together, kind of figure out the layout of the hands, and then we're going to do a pre-bake after we add some texture. The hands are going to need roughly about the same pre-bake time as the feet, so they're going to go in at 275 Fahrenheit for about 20 minutes. And then once those are out of the oven and have cooled to touch, we can start working on the tops of them. So we're going to do pretty much the same thing to the fingers that we did to the toes. We're going to add our claws, we're going to add scales. The only thing different is we're going to have these connect more at the wrist instead of the top of them, so we can add a few more scales going over the top of the hand. These scales are going to be a lot larger. So I'm going to place the scales on the tops of all of the hands, and then I'm going to use my tools to kind of clean up the edges. And if you want to add a texture, you can, but I think I want my scales to be a little smoother. Once we're done sculpting the hands, these can go in the oven for their final bake, and that's going to be at 275 Fahrenheit for about 35 minutes. Okay, so all of our clay pieces are out of the oven and have cooled to touch, and we're going to start painting them. I know I haven't shown you guys the fabric that I've picked out yet, but I've decided that I want to go with a red and black scheme. So most of our clay pieces are going to be primered with red. So I'm going to start with the eye first. I'm going to paint the upper eyelid a bright red, and then the bottom eyelid is going to be a bit darker. The reason I'm doing this is to just kind of bring more attention to the upper portion of the eye. So I'm going to get those painted, I'm going to let them dry, and then we can start adding detail. The first bit of detail that I want to do is I want to go around the eye a little bit, so I'm going to take some black paint and I'm just going to kind of trace right around the eyeball. Then I'm going to take kind of a pink color and I'm going to add a highlight to the top eyelid. I'm then going to take a really small detail brush and I'm going to use white and add some highlights around the eyeball. So I'm really happy with how the painting looks on the eye. I'm going to let it dry a little bit and then I'm going to add some eyelashes. So for the eyelashes, I'm actually going to be using fishing line for this. So I'm just going to cut a bunch of little tiny pieces of fishing line and I'm going to glue them into the holes that we made earlier when we sculpted the eyeball. So I'm going to glue those in place. I didn't cut any of the eyelashes to a specific length because I'm going to let them dry and then cut them later to the length that I want them. And then after I have the eyelashes cut to the size that I want, I'm going to take some more black acrylic paint and I'm going to go over that. That's going to have to dry again, and then I'm going to resin over the entire eye surface. I'm actually going to be painting on a layer of resin on all of my clay pieces, and this is going to help protect the paint. And because it's resin, it usually takes a long time to dry or cure, and I'm going to put it off to the side somewhere safe to cure when we're doing all the sewing and stuff. But I'm going to be resining this with all the other clay pieces, so I'm not going to do this till everything is done being painted. Okay, moving on to painting the mouth. The first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to take some more black acrylic paint. I'm going to water it down just a little bit, and I'm going to be painting in all the creases and cracks between the teeth. So I'm going to quickly paint the inside portion of the mouth, and then I'm going to wipe away any excess paint. You're going to have to let that dry, and then we can go over the teeth with a white to brighten them up. Now for fun, I decided that I want to do the upper lip black and the bottom lip red. So I'm going to completely go over the top lip with my black paint, and then I'm going to paint the bottom lip a really bright red. I'll let that dry as well, and then I'm going to take a kind of pinkish white, and I'm going to go over both of the lips with that to add a highlight to it. And then to add a little bit more detail to the lips, I'm going to use straight white, and I'm going to add some line work to make it look a little bit more glossy. Lastly, I'm going to take some gold paint, and I'm going to paint our piercings that are on the bottom lip. Okay, so the last thing that we're going to paint is our hands and feet, and I'm going to do them all at the same time because they're pretty much going to be painted the same way. So I'm going to start by primering all of them a nice bright red, and then we can start adding our details once that's dried. So I'm going to let those completely dry, and then I'm going to take some pink paint and I'm going to lightly go over the bottoms of the feet and the palms of the hands. So my paintbrush doesn't really have much paint on it at all, I'm just going to quickly go over it. Next, I want to paint all of my claws black, and then I want to take a little bit of white and frame the under portions, the pink portions of the hands and feet. So I'm just kind of going around the hands and feet to add a little bit of a trim to separate the pink a bit from the red. And then lastly, all the scales on the tops of the feet and hands, I'm going to be doing a darker red. And like I said, once I was done painting all the clay pieces, I mixed up my resin and I painted over all of them. These, of course, are going to have to cure somewhere safely overnight. So I'm going to set them somewhere off to the side to cure, and then we can start working on sewing. Okay, so these are all the weird pattern pieces that I decided to make so we can make our body for our monster. So the main body is going to be kind of shaped like a bowling pin. It's going to have a tail. I've got an under portion so that it won't be completely flat, and then we have pieces for the hands and the feet. So the main body color is going to be red, and to add that scaling that we need to add, I'm going to add a black sequence to it. But I don't want to cover the whole thing with it, so I'm just going to be sewing on stripes. So what I did was I drew onto the back of the red fabric where I want my stripes to be, and then I took my red fabric and I pinned it together with the sequence fabric, and we're just going to be sewing along those lines where the stripes are going to be. I'm going to use my sewing machine for this, and then I'm just going to cut away any excess sequence that we don't need. So I'm going to be adding the sequence stripes to the body and the tail. Now I know that is not a whole lot of sewing before assembling the monster, but I realized the way I have the body set up is I need the clay pieces now, so we're going to basically start putting it together right now. So I'm going to start by adding the mouth and the eyes to one of the body pieces. It doesn't matter which one, they're both the same. So to add the mouth, we're going to decide where it's going, and we're going to cut the body piece in half where that is. So since I have the upper lip black and the bottom lip red, I want to keep with that pattern. So I'm going to have the black stripe under the bottom lip and the red fabric over the upper lip. So I'm just going to take my fabric glue and I'm going to glue the fabric pieces around the mouth. And then I'm going to take the eye and we're going to be gluing that in place at the very top of our bowling pin. So that's going to have to dry for a little bit, so let's start working on the hands and feet. So for the feet, I have two pieces of fabric, a piece for the front and a piece for the back. I need to sew these two pieces together. So I'm going to pin them together and use my sewing machine real quick, and then we can take that fabric and start gluing it around the bases of the feet. That's going to have to dry a little bit as well, and then we're going to sew up the sides of our leg and stuff them. Now we're basically going to do the same thing for all the arms. So the arms are going to have a left and right piece. I'm going to pin them together, and we're going to be sewing the more inner side of the arm. So I'm going to pin all of these together, use my sewing machine to sew them together, and then I can take our fabric and we can start gluing them around the clay pieces for the hands. We'll let our glue dry for a little bit, and then we can start closing up the arms and stuffing them. Okay, so we pretty much have all of our body pieces ready. Now we're going to start putting them together. So I'm going to start by adding the arms to the body. So I'm going to decide where I want the arms to go on the body, and then I'm going to make some little cuts where those are going to be. And then I can take an arm and we can start sewing it into place onto the body fabric. I'm going to do this to the front piece of the body. I'm going to add 2 there, and then I'm going to do the same thing to the back of the body, and I'm going to add 2 arms there. And then we're going to take the under portion of the body. This is basically the bottom of the body and the bottom of the tail. I'm going to sew it to the very front of the front body piece, and then we're going to take our legs and we're going to sew those in place while we're sewing this in place as well. So we're going to sew a leg on each side. And then we can take our back piece and our front piece and we can start sewing those together. So we're just going to go all the way around and we're going to leave the bottom open. Once we have our body pieces connected, we can then stuff the body and start closing it up. So I'm going to get it stuffed, and then I'm going to close up the body as much as I can before we need to add the tail. For the tail, we have a left and right for that as well. We're going to pin these together and sew the very top portion of the tail together. We're then going to sew this to the bottom portion of the tail that's connected to the body. So we're going to close up the tail completely other than the very base of it, and then we can flip it right side out once it's completely sewn. Lastly, we're going to stuff the tail, and then we're going to sew it into place on the body and close everything up. Okay guys, and our monster is finally done. Here he is. Oh my god, I love doing this. This is so much fun. I can't wait to do another one. He's so strange looking. I had a lot of fun. I'm gonna have him in my Etsy shop. He'll probably be a little lower because he's not my normal thing that I normally do, but he'll be there if you guys want to give him a home. Okay, just put him on my shoulder. Can he stay? Stay. Kind of. But yeah, he is going to be in my Etsy shop, so if you guys want to check him out, the links are down below for my shop. Also, I've got all the products and stuff that I use to make him, and most of my art dolls linked down below as well. And thank you guys so much for watching. Make sure to like, subscribe to all that fun stuff, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye!